I mean, there's always people that are going to make the big difference in your life, and no one ever succeeds alone.
I know a lot of people that don't have someone like that in their life, and it's a tough thing because you're right, you can't do it by yourself.
When I got into business early in my 20s, I set out to be a powerhouse, right? I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted people to bow to me. I wanted the power. I wanted the prestige. I wanted the fame. These roles that we play, we get so attached to them. We attach ourselves to them that those end up driving our lives. The search for more, because if you play that game, the egoic game, you're never satisfied and you will always be looking for the next thing. The problem with that is once you get to the level those guys are at and you realize I've got everything I could ever imagine my entire life and I still don't feel any better, then where do you go?
All right, so I want to welcome Adam Hergenrother, and he is the founder and CEO of many companies. And I got an opportunity to interview Adam. We published him on Authority Magazine, and I wanted to follow up because after getting all the information about your experience and your companies, outside of the fact that you have a very large organization, we actually have a lot in common. And so I was really excited to talk to you and ask you questions. And we could just dive right in. And if you could just maybe just give us a little background before I start asking all the questions that I prepared for you. But just so the people listening understand who you are, maybe just a real quick, when you started your businesses and how you got to where you are today with the size that it is.
Sure. Yeah. And Chad, thanks for all that you do for your magazine, for the audience, and for anybody that's a member of your site, just because I know how much time and energy goes into this. And so thanks for adding all the value that you do to everybody. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Everyone's got their own journey, right? For me, when I was growing up, I kind of briefly get into this because it's relevant to business. I was I was really kind of about 100 pounds overweight. I was in the drugs, failing classes, and it's kind of that role model student that you wanted your kids to hang out with, per se. And it wasn't even that I was like a bad kid. It's just I was lost and I was actually trying to be somebody else that I wasn't. And I would make up lies that were just insignificant, like that just didn't mean anything. And just, trying to always fit in. Right. And I was really trying to fit into how the mold of what everybody else wanted me to be. And so I would always be like a chameleon, and regardless of who I was, and it was exhausting, to be honest with you. Finally, one day I came home as a freshman in high school, and, people have asked a lot of times, like, was there a trigger? Was there a moment? And it was, I don't know what happened. It's nature takes care of many things in our lives that we don't think about. So in this case, there was just this big movement that was like, this is not the life you're supposed to live. And it wasn't like a spiritual, per se, or a woo moment. It was just a feeling, right? It came over me, and I was like, you're right. Like this, I don't want to live my life this way. And so I stayed up all night. I remember playing Celine Dion on repeat she was popular back then. Let's be clear. She was. And I stayed up, and I was in between crying and not necessarily for like angry things. I was just like, what am I doing in my life type thing? And my dad worked nights, and he came in, and it was like midnight, and he was like, what are you doing up? And I was like, I'm just not happy with my life, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, you can accept it, or you can do something about it. And he shut the door and left, like, just like that. I was like, great. Right. But he wasn't wrong. And so I started getting into a little bit of positive affirmations, visualizations at that time, of kind of like, what do I want my life to look like? And so the next day I went to school as a freshman, and I dropped all of the people that I was hanging out with. I wouldn't even call them friends, because for the next 2 weeks, they broke all my windows. They threatened me with guns. Like it was a big, or cops were involved. Finally, they realized that once I was kind of out of their grip, they just went on their own world. And unfortunately, a lot of those individuals are no longer with us today. And they weren't really bad individuals. They were just lost themselves too. And they didn't like the fact that somebody was moving outside of their group. And I got into football as a freshman, and I got pretty competitive in it. So I ended up losing 100 pounds in a year. And physicality and fitness is really important to me today. That's why part of our foundation works with kids and youth and sports, because it really helped to change my life. And it gave me the kind of courage and intensity to be able to live the life that I wanted to live. And I used that into, I would like to say that like it changed my life like amazingly, but like there were still a lot of challenges. I went through high school, and because my grades were so bad, I went through the GAP program at UVM, but I'm kind of fast forwarding. We can put a pin on these things and go back to it, but let me just get through the track, and then you can ask your questions. So I graduated, went into college. I was on what's called a GAP program, which was like guaranteed admissions, but I had to get a 3.0 or better. And straight schooling does not come naturally to me. Like I am intellectually, I struggle. Like I can take tests, but I have to study 3 times as hard. And I just honestly applied myself harder than everybody else did. And I ended up getting like a 3.3 my first semester. By the way, there was 9 of us that went into the GAP program. I was the only one that made it after the first semester. Not that they're not smart, they just didn't really apply themselves. And so I ended up getting in, and then I ended up graduating, but top of my class, and I was part of this in finance, this course called Advanced Honors Wall Street Seminar, which was amazing. But there was a key moment to this business. As a freshman in college, I had a really good friend of mine. He was in college, but not in college. Like he slept in my bed, basically, like next to me, if you know, like the roommate that didn't go to college, but was there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, basically. Right. And his dad owned a car dealership, and he's like, came to me, and I was working during college to pay for things. And he's like, hey, if you give me $500, I can put $500 in, Chris and Chad. And I think that his name was Chris. And I said, Chris, do you think, what do you think the return is going to be like? And he said, well, I think I can get us like $200 or $300 each. And so we put this money in, and like a week later, he came back to me and he said, hey, look, I've sold this, and we each made $1,000. And Chad, the thing was, it was the first time that I actually felt leverage in my life. I never saw the car, I never saw the vehicle, and my money went in. There's all the money that I had in my bank account, by the way, and I got it back. And so we just kept rotating and flipping cars, and I ended up amassing like $60,000 as a freshman. I also learned the value of contracts, because at the end of that year, he's like, at some point he woke up and he goes, you're not doing anything, I don't need your money anymore, thank you, like I'm done, right? And that was an interesting moment. But I ended up taking that money, and I put it into an investment property as a sophomore in college. And I was still living with my brother and kind of this thing. So I didn't buy a house. I didn't like increase my lifestyle that much. I just bought an investment property. And let me paint the era for this for folks. This was 2002, 3 and 4 and 5, right? So like I literally timed the real estate market perfectly. And by the time I graduated college, it was worth like $80,000 more, right? And so I was like, no wonder why everyone's in real estate. This is like the easiest thing in the world. Like you just put some money in, you wait a couple of years, and it's like this is why everyone's a billionaire. I get it now, right? And so I ended up selling that unit. That's a whole other story. And that I ended up paying a commission to a real estate professional. And I remember like that was as much money as I paid in a commission as I made pretty much all year. And I was like, man, I think I can do that. So I ended up leaving my job and getting into real estate. And then from there, I started building companies, right? Leverage. I tell people like I'm inherently lazy. And so if there's anything that somebody else can do, I naturally try to find a way for them to do it better than I could, unless it has something to do with that only I can do it. And so I started naturally leveraging to other people. And the way that I first started building businesses was contrary to how most people built a business, which was you've got to put your sweat and equity into it. And let me be clear, I worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week for the first 4 years of my life. So it wasn't about sweat equity, but everyone's like, you got to be the one doing everything. It's just a different mindset of how to build a small business versus building a big business. And it wasn't until I met Gary in 2009 that he actually confirmed how I was thinking. And then from there, I just started blossoming. And, we've got over thousands of people, today into our organization. And so here we are.
Unbelievable. And how many employees do you have?
We have over 1,000 people at this point. Between all of our organizations.
And how many different leadership teams do you report to you?
There's probably direct reports. I have 3.
Okay. 3 teams or 3 people?
3 people.
And then they have teams under
they've got all executive leadership teams and stuff like that. Pretty much presidents or CEOs of companies report to me.
Okay. And
I've literally tried to fire myself from every position that I've ever had.
Have you been able to do it?
I have, yeah. It's not. I made some mistakes along the way, but a lot of them. But I'm not a great operator, and I like to be the first one in, and I'm willing to take risk, and I'm willing to push the boundaries and take a vision and push it and direct it and charge it. And then also, I love hiring really good people. And the funny story about this, my dad is really good with like his hands, like in building things and construction. And all my life, he was always trying to get me to like build a tree fort with him. And like I would do it for an hour, and I was like, this is ridiculous. We should just hire somebody to do this. And he's like, no, it's part of the whole thing. finally one day after like I made it, if you will, he went to me and he's like, I think I understand this. And I was like, yeah, Dad, here's the thing. Like you get so much joy from building something with your hands. I get the same joy from watching other people build it inside our organization. And I said, it's the same feeling. It's just two different ways of going about doing it.
Right, right. So that was one of the things that resonated with you. So I was a visionary for over 20 years and I sold my company on my 25th anniversary and I had to find an operator at the end of it so I can go start something else. And so
Yes.
when I was thinking about the first interview we did, I resonated with it because I know how hard that is. And it's something that people who have never experienced that they can't wrap their head around it. And while you're doing it and you're sending ripples throughout your team because you're changing, you're passing the torch of leadership, there's just a lot of nuances and you break through those ceilings, the complexities change. And then one thing that resonated me big time was that you realized you didn't have the right team who's going to be able to take you to that next level. So talk to me about what you experienced with that, because I would imagine you were pretty close with people and you seem that you have that kind of personality. And so realizing that one, you're not the right person and your team's not the right person, and you got to make these changes. You can make the changes, no problem. Your team, it changes their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you make those decisions, and tell me what the outcome was?
Yeah, man, that's the hardest. That was probably the hardest part of my career in terms of decision making. I think a leader's their work products are decisions, and that's what separates really great companies versus companies that stay mediocre is the quality of decisions somebody makes. And the reason why nobody else wants to make them is because they're hard, right? They affect people's lives, and I love my people, and so I grew before I sold the majority of one of my companies. For about 10 years, I was really close to all these people. We built up, we were at this level, and we needed to scale our organization. And I started bringing I started at first, the first actually interesting, back up a second, just telling the leadership team that they're going to I'm bringing somebody else in to be the main operator created way more ripples effect than I actually had anticipated. Like people were instantly texting and emailing me one-on-ones. Like, what does this mean for me? It's gonna be a different level of accountability. I'm here for you. Like all of this conversation. I was like, look, I'm not going anywhere. Right. Like I need somebody to make your life easier and also hold you more accountable, because I naturally will get more into visionary mode versus accountability mode. Right. And so I need somebody that holds models, systems, and the rest of the organization together in a cohesive way. I need a real operator. And so I went and found an operator, and what started happening was this individual was doing just that. They were holding everybody accountable. They were holding systems accountable, projects accountable. And it created this, like, we don't do it that way. Well, this is the way we're doing it, right? And this whole, it was tough. And I realized the majority of our leadership team that we had built was not the right organization, the right team to get us to the next level. And we started hiring additional, I brought in a president, and then he had his own people, as that they do, right? They wanted to bring in a couple of his own people. So he started doing that. And then all of a sudden it occurred into this and more. And so finally I sat down and I was like, look, like, this is just with me. And I just being real. I was like, I either am going to lose the people that I just hired, which I think are the team to bring us to the next level, because they're going to get really frustrated with other people slowing them down. And not that either team's really wrong per se, they're just seeing the world differently. And if I don't let go of our existing leadership team, then they're going to sit there and fight. And now they're unhappy because you have this new team coming in there. And so ultimately, we had to make some tough decisions of just, I had to make some really tough decisions of just letting some of our seasoned individuals go. And I took as great care of them as I could, and just let them know that we're always there and the organization's in a different spot. And I also explained it with my own position of, hey, they're coming in and take over a lot of what I do. And it's not just me, or not just you, it's me too. Right. Cause they're the ones that can operate this at a different level. And I'm really excited for them to come in. But it's, we summarize that in a couple minutes, but if you're going through that over months, it's very taxing and it can be intoxicating at times. And you just have to know that business is nothing but a conduit for your personal growth.
Yeah. I always like to say, like, for me, and that sounds like for you too, having the self-awareness to know that you're in the wrong seat before someone has to tell you that you're in the wrong
Yeah,
seat
exactly.
is a good deal, right? Because I was causing problems in my business because I'm not that operator, and I was doing it for so long, and we broke through those ceilings, and those new complexities came up, and they were above my pay grade. Like, I didn't know how to do
Yeah.
it, and I didn't want to do it. I was
Yes.
frustrated, and it was hard. Tell me though, and I could tell without even really knowing that much about it, but I was a big culture guy, and I would imagine you are too because you care about your people. And I know that if you look at like the military, around 100, 120 people is when they break off their battalion, right? Because you can't keep your culture. So for someone who focuses on culture and focuses on building your people, how hard has it been, and how have you done it? How have, because it changes. And I don't know what it's like to have as many employees as you have, but I know it changes around that 100 mark. And I'm just curious to know like your journey with culture, if you could just talk about it, and how have you tried to kind of sustain it as you've grown?
Yeah, it's really interesting. In the beginning, it was very easy because I was and then this becomes easy, but also becomes the problem for most entrepreneurs that own smaller businesses. And they can be big. I just mean smaller businesses and count. Is everything's built on the nucleus of an individual. So like their behavioral patterns are also basically you hire people to kind of cater to your faults, if you will, as a leader. So you hire people and they start picking up where you slack off. So the system is actually built on an individual's faults, if you will. And this is where people get stuck in them building the nucleus. And one of the biggest mistakes I see is when people try to remove themselves, the rest of the organization doesn't know what to do because it was built on this one individual pulling all the strings all the time. In the beginning, when you're the one doing that, you're touching everybody, right? And even if there's a second layer, even if there's 50 employees or 30 employees, it can get, I feel like after 30, you can get lost pretty quickly, but even 30 to 50, you start, you can still feel the organization. If like, I'm like my hands out, like people can see it, but like you can kind of feel the organization, you get a tone for how people are. And then at some point after 50 or 60, you just don't even know who's being hired anymore. Like you may get an email about it and like you may send it over there, but like people are coming and going. Some people are leaving, some people are being fired, some people, it's just, you can't pay. And it's not like you don't care about them. You just can't physically pay all of your attention to that because you wouldn't do anything, right? So you just naturally find yourself just unaware of things that are happening, or you walk through the hall one day and you just don't know half the people that are in your office, right, that are there. So what we decided to do as we were building this is each core group has like we embody like an ethos or part of the organization that fosters the overall culture of the organization. So the way I thought about this is if we can get every 6 to 9 people embodying who we are as an organization, then the whole organization stands for that. And so, we sit down and you can create your kind of like win-win or no deal, right? That's one of our things, right? Seek curiosity first, right? That's another thing that we kind of are big on. And we had a list of like 8 of those things, but the reality is they really boiled down to a couple, which is really how we try to translate our organization, which is it's got to be a win-win or no deal. So like if this is not a win for you, it's not a win for me. In sports, there's a win-lose relationship, right? And everyone goes in knowing that. In business, it doesn't need to be that way. With your clients, with other employees, with your manager, with your leader, with your subordinates, whoever it is, win-win or no deal for people going on there. And then always seek curiosity first, which is really a way of saying drop your ego when you go in there, no not going to be right. If you go into a conversation with the expected outcome that you want to happen already, then you go in unwilling to look at other alternatives that might be able to better serve the organization. And so for us, it's a really big, and it doesn't mean that you won't feel hurt if people don't use your stuff. It doesn't mean that you may not like what the decision is, but you're willing to see other angles instead of being so rigid in terms of this is the way it's going to be, and this is the way we've decided to do it. So we really seek curiosity how each individual is thinking about a problem, seek curiosity how each individual is thinking about how to solve a client issue or the employee issue, whatever that is. And that has really served us well in our organization as we've grown.
Very cool. Have you ever brought in a third party? Like, are you familiar with like an EOS company or
Yeah,
have you guys used them?
we never have.
How did you in your journey, and we'll talk about it at the end, your desire to be kind of in the coaching mode, in that professional development mode of helping people become their best version of themselves. But how did you learn it? What did you go to courses? Did you have coaches?
That's a great yes. Yes to all of that. The reality is I joke with people, like, I feel like I built an organization so I could coach and train to them, to be honest with you. And like, it just happened to be in real estate and we happened to, build it from there. At the heart, I love coaching and training and making an impact. It's such a cliche word, but just helping other people gain more inner peace or just lightness in their life, right? Any way we can do that. And so we bring that level of personal growth into our organization. It's always been on the forefront of this. So when I was in the very big, actually back up. In 2006, when I started getting into real estate, I borrowed $8,000 to start my first business, and I took all of it and I went to a conference. So how many people, literally, I spent all of my money on education, right? And so I remember going to this conference and I was there for 3 hours, and I was there with my girlfriend, who now is my wife. And I took in all the information that I needed, and I went back. And so education and training has been an absolute staple of my life. I've done everything that, I think early in my 09 or 10, 11, I did everything that Tony Robbins ever did. I actually ended up speaking with Jarek Robbins in Boston at an event one day. I met Tony, like I did all that style. I went to Bain Henyon. I don't know if you're ever familiar with that name. He had this thing called the AVA. It was all about behavioral analysis for individuals when hiring people. And I went down for a week and took this course on how to use these really cool assessments. Now there's a lot more of them, but just really cool assessments on how to understand somebody's natural behavior and how they're going to respond in the workplace. And I ended up using that into a lot of stuff. And then I started teaching that stuff. So all over. And that became pretty fun to teach people how to understand behavior, understand your own behavior, how to lead in people. Because again, for me,
how did you scale that in your company with all your employees?
Well, for me, it was just me in the beginning. Like it was just me
Right.
teaching. I was teaching all the time, right? And people then would teach it from there, but that's really what it was. It was just me. And then I started, in 2012, I started a company called MindSpark that lasted for like 90 days, right? It was kind of my pre-venture of trying to do like a Tony Robbins-esque, if you will, of what it was. And we used some of those videos and we made them fun. But and then Gary Keller, who's my business partner and also a mentor of mine, his philosophy is training. And so I spent about a couple days a month for about 3 or 4 years down in Austin with him. And he taught me a tremendous amount of information that I would then take and then go teach the rest of the organization. And so he was very, very open. And there was a group of 3 or 4 of us early on in our careers that we're building, that we were meeting with him personally. And that gave me the kind of the runway to go out and teach to other people.
Very cool. That's really
There's
cool.
always, the thing is though, there's always people that are going to make the big difference in your life. And no one ever succeeds alone.
Right.
And if you think you do, you're missing the people around
You're
you.
blessed. You're blessed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people that don't have someone like that in their life. And it's a tough thing because you're right. You can't do it by yourself.
And I've also had, to answer your question on coaches, I had coaches many times throughout my life. I don't necessarily now, but I have a lot more mentors that are in my life that I consider, coaches, if you will. They're not hardcore. Like, did you get this accountability done? But they're more of like, in terms of larger decisions that have to be made, we kind of bounce them off from there.
Right. So I started in my leadership program, and it was about a lot of what I hear you talking about, a lot about what we discussed in your first interview. And it starts with picking your big dream and hitting your why and knowing why you're coming in every day, getting that purpose clear, getting that vision clear, and then being able to communicate that to the rest of your organization on top of being able to build yourself. So like your core, right? And one of the pieces to that, which really struck me when I was reading your response to me when I had asked you a couple of questions, was the identity piece, which is you had talked about you didn't know who you were. You were doing videos, you had a suit on, you're like asking us, who are you? And it's a crazy thing because it took me many, many years to realize, like what does it mean to try to identify who you are? And I realized more recently as I sold businesses and I became in a different role that like, you could say you're an athlete, but if you don't play sports anymore, you're not an athlete, but you may identify as that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I had my way of doing it, but like, how did you figure out your like true identity, and how do you coach other people who most people are walking through life, they do not know who they are? And I say it's one of the hardest things in the world to do is to be yourself.
Yeah. It's a very deep and beautiful question. I brought up the story when I was a freshman in high school because I figured we'd come back to this. I had that turning point in my life. When I got into business early in my 20s, I set out to be a powerhouse, right? I wanted to be a billionaire. I wanted people to bow to me. I wanted the power. I wanted the prestige. I wanted the fame. I really wanted my parents to know that I was successful, right? Like I literally was trying to prove to the world, right? Like, and it worked, by the way. There's cost to that, but it worked. And I had this goal that once I hit $500,000 in income, that somehow there was going to be this magic fruit tree in my backyard that was going to be filling me up with peace every moment. I come to realize this is how I defined how most people say go be successful. This is how I've come to define it for people. Most people that say that, like go be a business owner, go get money, go whatever it is, fame, what they're really saying is that go be successful, which means if I go get enough money, power, leverage, authority, right, higher roles, any of those type of those accolades, if I get any of that stuff, then what I'm going to be able to do is I'm going to be able to control the situations around me so that the inner experience that I'm having is the inner experience that I want to have. And that's what people are defining as success. And so and I didn't say it like that back then. I've come to say it now. And so when I was 26, I was at a holiday party and I was with my mom, who's the most unassuming individual. She could care less about money. We all know somebody like that, right? They're like, you could literally tell them you just made $1 billion and they would be like, that's great, right? They just literally truly don't care, right? I went to her and I was like, hey, I made $500,000 this year. And she was like, that's great, pass the ketchup. And in that moment, I realized like, she doesn't care. She actually doesn't care the fact that I made this money. And then what really happened though is I went home that night and I said, do I care? Do I actually care that I made this money? And of course, my ego would be like, well, of course you care. You can do all these different things and look at all the stuff you're doing and like, look at all these awards you've won, right? And my ego is just, talking incessantly. But the deeper part of me was like, I don't know if I care. And so I started my journey of going much more inwardly at that point. I realized that the path that I was on, I enjoyed building things and I enjoyed being in the world. But I want to attach myself or my identity to anything that I was doing anymore. And the funny thing is the minute I pulled away from that, and I like to say like it happened overnight, but for years I faked it, right? For years I was like, oh, I'm going down the spiritual path, and yet I would be totally consumed by my ego, right? Like it was like, I was putting on a really that whole spiritual ego people talking about now. And that happened for like 3 or 4 years. But each time, like I just got a little bit deeper, and it got easier to see my actions and what was really driving me and what my real motives were. And it was none of that was who I was. And these roles that we play in life are wonderful and they're ease and we can label them. They're not who you are. Again, like you said, you can be an athlete, but if you lose your legs, you're not an athlete, right? Or I guess you could be, but like you're not there. If you're a CEO at some point, I'm no longer going to be a CEO, right? I've already been removed from those things. Like if you're a parent, at some point, you could not be a parent, right? Or if you're a grandson, at some point you may not, where you get the whole point, right? These roles that we play, we get so attached to them and we attach ourselves to them that those end up driving our lives. Right. And so for me, when I went into this inward journey, I recognized that there was a whole other side of life, which is 100% inner world. There was still 100% outer world, which I love to play in. But if I didn't put myself together first, it didn't matter what I was going to do out there. It was never going to give me the feeling that I'm looking for. And that's what, up for those 10 years, I was searching for that feeling of, I want to be free. I want to feel lightness. I want peace in my life. I want to be able to, I think the absolute freedom people are really looking for is to be able to walk through this world, without being hit by the world's experiences, meaning not to be disturbed by things that happen and not to wear a coat of anxiety around with you that, do I keep my money and like how people are going to sue me and all these different things, of just being able to be truly allow life to be life. And that's a wonderful freeing feeling.
Why most people are on drugs and they use substances to cope with the problems because they don't want to have life hit them in the face. And, for leadership and anyone who's into it, and I know you can speak to this too, but you build yourself the inward so that when the storm hits, you can stand. So you don't get knocked over, because the time to start working on it is not when the storm comes, because the storm's coming. It's coming for everybody and everyone's going to experience it. So yeah, I think it's a very powerful message, and you're very blessed to be able to find that so early on, the self-awareness of going inward. Because I think I always say that when a rich person walks into a room and everyone is like, wow, millionaire, billionaire, whatever the person is. Meanwhile, the guy, and that's what they're defining as successful.
I know.
Well, the guy could be beating his wife at home. He could be a total jerk to his kids. He could be, who knows, right? And I just think it's an interesting way of looking at rich and wealth. And I think wealth is different than being rich in life. No question. So I think your perspective is very healthy. And
there was a funny story about this. I was meeting a few years back. I was meeting with the wealthiest person in Vermont who does a really good job of hiding who he is, and he had just come back from Warren Buffett's giving pledge in New York City. And this is like the night before he was down there. And he said there was 100 billionaires. I was having breakfast with him. There's 100 billionaires there. And you know what he said to me? And we were just talking about it and talking about money. He's like, Adam, it was really interesting. He's like, there's 100 billionaires in the room. 97 of them are absolutely miserable. And these guys have created massive value. They've created drugs that have saved lives. They've created computers that have created efficiencies beyond anything. They've got their names on hospitals and wings and colleges, and have donated hundreds of millions of dollars to fight hunger. And like, they've done all these wonderful, amazing things in their life. And yet every one of them, 97, he said 97% of them are absolutely miserable. And he said their inward state is just, he said, Warren's not like that, by the way, he said at all. And he's not either. And he said, there's another one that he didn't name. But he said, everybody else was exactly what you just described. And he's like, you didn't want to talk to them because like, they were just the search for more, because if you play that game, the egoic game, you're never satiated. You're always going to be, you're never satisfied, and you will always be looking for the next thing. And that's why then that the problem with that is, once you get to the level those guys are at, and you realize I've got everything I could ever imagine in my entire life, and I still don't feel any better, then where do you go? And that's why people then go, I need to go make another billion, or I need to go build another company. And they just repeat the pattern over and over again.
Yeah. So yesterday I had an interview with someone who helps people with addictions. And the real addiction to work is a real thing. And especially like for visionaries who have ideas and they want to like be able to go do more. And my own motto personally is like, just because I can do it doesn't mean I should go do it. Because you dive into it, and you know what happens when you dive into it. You start a whole ripple. And then when you realize you don't want it, then you're rippling out, and it's hitting people's lives. And it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to be able to be in that role. And I think being able to temper that and to know who you are it's such a foundational piece to leadership, that I think people they want the secrets to be able to let be, and it just it's not like that. It's built over time. And I think I'm curious to know, because I know we don't have too much time left, but just a couple other things. One real quick one is there anything that you can think of that you think deeply about, or that you believe so much that other people think you're crazy?
I think about death often. I say like 40 times a day.
Wow.
Not in a morbid thought way, but in a way of understanding to appreciate the deepest part of the moment. I think most people fear death because they're still thinking that life owes them something, or they're still searching for some experience in their life that they haven't received. And if you keep it on the forefront of your life, and you realize that every experience that you're having is experience, and the depth of that experience is what you're looking for, is already right in front of you. And it helps bring a lot more blessings into your life, but it also gives you peace. It gives you your own peace with mortality. It allows you to be a lot more freer in your life.
Wow. Okay. I have a question for you on that. So I learned from someone that when you have deep beliefs, sometimes it's better not to share, because when you share it and people aren't where you are, no matter what they say, can kind of take the air right out of you just because of their reaction to it. So something like that, where it's a constant in your brain and you're using it as an actual motivator. I mean, you're using it in a positive way, but when people hear you, I would imagine they immediately go dark with it, and they think you're, again, I guess you answered my question. They think you're a little crazy. And so I'm curious, do you share that a lot with people, or is that something that you just kind of keep to yourself?
When they ask, if people ask, then I will certainly share anything. I try to not push anything on anybody. And I think if the time is right for anybody, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I wrote the 200% Life book, is a practice of this 100% inner world, 100% outer world, and a reflective and new way to look at leadership. And we talk about death in the book, and, it's a lot of people's favorite chapter, because it helps people, that and identities. You mentioned identities. That's another one for people, but, the people that want to talk about it will talk about it. And then if people ask me about my thoughts about death, and because there's no logical reason why you wouldn't talk about it. Because you are going to die, right? I'm always interested in people's response when they don't like that. And I listen, right? I don't put any judgment on them, because that's their path, and that's for them. But you are going to die, and we got to recognize that. And that could happen at any point in time. So then stop trying to think that life owes us anything. It doesn't owe us anything. It's already owed you everything you could ever experience. Again, the only reason why people fear so much death is because they fear that there's an experience they still haven't had, which, by the way, is them for self-realization, to understand who they are. it's not enlightenment. Enlightenment is a state of consciousness reserved for masters, but it's a state of consciousness to understand who is the one that was, when you looked in the mirror when you were 10, it was the same you looking in the mirror when you're 10 and you're looking in the mirror today. You just see a different reflection. Who is in there, that one that understands that you had a dream? Who is the one that understands you didn't have a dream? Who is the one that feels all of the emotions you feel every moment? Who's the one that hears that voice in your head? By the way, even narrating this conversation, instead of listening to you and I, they're listening to the mind narrate whether they like what I said or didn't like what I said, right? They're in there listening to that. So who's the one listening? And once you realize that's really you and everything else are just objects of consciousness, it gives you a much deeper sense of peace and gratitude for whatever is unfolding in front of us.
Yeah, it's a very good perspective. Do you have a hard time, even though you let people think and believe what they want, but those that don't have that growth mindset, those that don't have any aspect of their life where either it's the positive thinking or it's the desire to grow, when you have a team as large as yours, you're going to have people that, I mean, I had a leadership team and only 30% of my company was in it, because it's hard to look at yourself and figure this stuff out, because you got to dig out some stuff and people don't want to do it. How do you deal with that? And is it a problem for you in your organization when you want to try to build something great? You know who you need to do it with, but you got people there that aren't doing it.
Yeah. It's always a challenge, just like any business, which is why we get into it, because it gives us opportunities to solve things. For me, this is one of the reasons why I've removed myself from a lot of these positions, is because there's people that should probably better off serving the individuals that need to on an everyday business of taking care of it. And then I try to bring in the overarching culture of the organization through teachings and trainings and videos and books and that type of thing. I think I'm best served there. And then they get those pieces in there. Like I just completed a course for all of our people on fiscal like responsibility, right? So like that's one way to be able to teach people. And we did a 4-week course, right, which is about what are your personal financial looks like? It's amazing how many people don't even know what their own, people have an idea and they think they know what they're spending every month. And I've done this for years. You probably have too. Everyone is way underestimating what they spend every month. They just are. And then it's almost, they don't want to look what they're actually spending, because they know it's almost like you almost don't want to look in the scale to see what you weigh, right? Or you don't want to look at your bank account at the end of the month because you're afraid of what's in there. Then I actually always ask people, I go, well, who's afraid in there? Well, who's actually afraid? Nobody else is around when you look at the scale. So who's afraid? And it just, again, I kind of insert that growth mindset into that way. But of course, there's people that don't want to grow. And if they're a wonderful contributor to the organization, we don't push anything on them. But of course, there's people that are growth oriented and are not good people in the organization. And those individuals no longer have a spot here. But we try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and with accountability. And if they up to that, then we'll take as deep as we can in terms of the personal growth realm. And if they want to go deep into that, they do. And there's people that are, first entry level employees that love from a really deep spiritual perspective, email me and I respond to everybody about that and what we can do and how we can help them.
Very cool. So last thing I want to wrap up with, can you walk me through your day? What time do you get up? Your disciplines that you throughout the day, and where is your time spent? You have these companies, you're doing some stuff that you want to go chase down your dream, which is going to be in the coaching world. So tell me a little bit about your program, how much time is spent on your companies overseeing the things, and then personally, like just walk me through your day.
Yeah. I don't even call it discipline, because like I don't feel like I'm a disciplined person. I just feel like I've built, like it's what I enjoy doing. So like I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and people are like, wow, you're so disciplined. I'm like, I actually just enjoy getting up in the morning. Like I enjoy having, again, you can call it whatever you want and put labels on it, but I get up at 4, I drink some water, I go outside, whether it's really cold or really hot, I just take some fresh air in. And usually I have a German Shepherd, so I usually let him out with me as well too. And then I meditate for 20 minutes. I do transcendental meditation. As soon as I'm done meditating, I get into a series of journaling. And I have a journal for each one of my kids. I have 3 kids under 11, and I journal about ever since they were born, every day of their life, they have a journal about their life. And I bring in photos too. I use Evernote. So I just drag photos into it. So they have a collage of their entire life of things they said, they did, that nobody would ever remember. Right. And so later on, if I happen to leave before they really, because, do you really know somebody when you were 7, do you really know who your parents are? Do you know how they really felt about you? So I never wanted them to question how I feel about them and how much they meant to me. So I journaled about their lives every day. So each one of my kids has that. And it's just some funny things that are in there too. And then I have one for my wife as well too, which is the 365 things that I'm grateful for her. And again, sometimes it's hard to find something that you're grateful for her, but it forces me to get out of that thinking of like about her and thinking about or about me, how I feel, and thinking about holding space for her. So I journal about that, and then I have a it's just a Adam's journal. Like it's literally like the good, the bad, the ugly. It's really just taking anything that's taking or trying to consume me from a thought perspective, and I put it on paper and get it out there. People ask, I don't ever really read them again. I just more about cleansing and clearing out so that I'm clear. Again, I said earlier, I think the biggest thing a leader can do, and leading your family, leading a company, leading a sports team, leading, coaching your kids' team, whatever you're doing, is quality of decisions. And so the clearer you are, the more stability you have, the more vision you have, the better your decision making is. And so for me, when I journal and I meditate and I get in there, it clears things out so I can see things as them being undisguised so I can make a better decision. Then as soon as I'm done that, then I get into a lot of exercise. I've done a bunch of Ironmans, so I'm a big endurance guy. So every day, like right now, it's skiing season. So I skin every morning at 5:50. So I literally skin up a mountain. I changed, like this morning I did 2 laps, right? And so I climbed like 4,000 vertical feet in 7 degrees and skied like an incredible powder this morning, right? Just untouched stuff. And then I'm back at my house by like 7:40, right? And so like I see my kids off, I say goodbye to them, and then I usually start my day around 8:30, and then 8:30 to 9 to about 11:30 is reserved for appointments. I block from 11:30 to 1 off each day, and I meditate again, and I'm focused on what I eat, so I eat again. I also like handle like the various things that come in, right? Emails, phone calls, the 5 minutes somebody needs during that time as well. And then from 1 until about 4:30 is another blocked time, usually about 4, because I like to have a half an hour to transition back throughout my day. And then I'm pretty much done. And that's about 4 days a week. Fridays being very open. And that is really reserved for reading, writing, content creation, on those type of things is what I'm really doing. I've actually added Wednesdays into a lot of content creation. I have my own podcast. So we spend about 4 hours putting together that whole thing. So a lot of as I've become less and less of an operator over this past year, I have a lot more free time to go into the more coaching, the training, creating. Again, we wrote a book, my second book, this one more about this. And so I just trying to get that out there as much as possible.
And do you have a leadership program that you do offer people?
We do. We have it's called Project U. We sold out. I don't think I'm actually going to do it again next year. I think I'm going to create more of an online course that's a more equitable version. The problem is when you're holding events and stuff, there's a cost associated to that, and I'd rather take more of my time and energy and create courses that are much more affordable for people to be able to get out to more people, and people are asking for that. So I think we're going to position that ends in June, and we're going to start transitioning to more of that way to help push it out.
Very cool. It's so funny you had started that off that you didn't feel like you were a disciplined person. You filled your life up with the things that you love and the things that you're good at, and it ends up being, just like your daily routine, but you're the most disciplined dude I've ever met.
So people say, I know, I just don't see, I don't wake up feeling like I'm very disciplined. I understand the mechanics of the word and how people describe it, but I just wouldn't have any other way, right? Like I don't need to work ever for generations from a financial standpoint, right? And I don't think you do either. Like I could do whatever I want. So like I set up my life the way I would do it. And I really enjoy, look, nothing good happens after 8:30 anyways, right? Like really, like nothing good. So I go to bed early. It's the next question everyone asks, what time do you go to bed? I'm like, I go to bed early. I put my kids to bed and I'm sleeping before 9 o'clock, right? Like I usually like to go to bed at 8:30, right? That's just what I love to do. But I love that morning time. And I would do that again. It's nothing to do with work. Again, nothing. It's just, I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, it's funny. So I wake up at 4. And my favorite part about that is that I love when that 8:30 rolls around in the morning, that like, or 7:30, everyone else is waking up. So everything I'm doing while they're sleeping, and I've always done that too. And I got more done. And it's the time, that's, you can, everything in life that you lose that has a price tag can be replaced.
Yeah. Yes.
But our time can't be. So if you don't make use of your time, and everyone says time goes so fast. I always hear entrepreneurs say, I want to live in the moment. I want to be present. I'm like, well, you got to be present.
Yes,
And if you
exactly.
don't, that's when you hear people say time goes so fast because they're not present. So they're thinking about the
Yes.
future. They're worried about the past. And the next thing you know, it's the end of the year and it's New Year's Eve. And it's like, holy cow, where'd the year go? But unless you take time to actually make use of your time, you're going to always feel like it went fast, always. So you can slow down your life. It's funny how many successful people wake up early. It is incredible.
It
It
is.
really is.
It really is. There's a few people in my executive leadership team that are night owls, and they truly are way better on at night. It's like they are literally like, and because they know I've pushed mornings for forever, and they literally have tried it, and like they can work till 1 in the morning, like I work at 4 in the morning. Like it is wild. Like, and I'm like, you need to go, but it's a small percentage of people. It's like less than 10%.
Yeah.
But if people are hearing this, I used to not be like that. When I first got in the business, I would sleep till 7:30. This was, when I was 21, 22 years old. And so like I remember reading an article that Tim Cook had. It talked about his routine. He got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, well, if Tim's getting up at 5, I should get up at 4:30. And I just remember that's how my path started. And I realized I also think people need a reason to get up. And I think if you just get up to not do anything, it can be anything. You can walk, you can read, you can meditate, you can prayer, whatever it is that you want to do, have a reason to get up. And then you have a reason to go to bed. I always joke with people. I'm like, people really need an alarm clock at night, not an alarm clock in the morning. Because
Right.
really, if you have an alarm clock at night and you go to bed, you get up. I get the same amount of sleep. I still get 7.5 hours of sleep, right? And it's wonderful sleep, and it's good. So
Right. Adam, so really enjoyed our conversation. I could go on all day, but I really appreciate your time, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck with all your endeavors, with your coaching program, and with the impact that you have on people's lives. Nothing but blessings and success for you and your family. And I hope your kids grow up one day and realize how blessed they are to have a father who's capturing everything that we don't remember when we're little kids. And I think that's a real special thing that you do, and it's a great discipline. So thank you so much for sharing that, and I look forward to hopefully connecting in the future.
yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate this conversation. I loved it, and appreciate all that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, one sec.